In this video demonstration, we're going to learn about ArcFM Advanced Labeling's Spatial Relationship Labeler. We're currently looking at buildings, and we see that buildings are being labeled based on the street number, based on the address. Now that information doesn't actually live on the building's layer. For each building, we need to find a nearby service point. In this case, here for 3411, it happens to be service point number 13. Service point number 13 is within 25 feet of that particular building. What we need to do from there, though, actually is drill in deeper into the related service address record. And it's here in service address that we can find the related street number attribute. So I'm going to show you the label expression for this. It's actually a very simple expression. We are going to be labeling on buildings. We're going to find nearby service points. So we use the spatial relation labeler. Again, we would have just double-clicked from the left window here to add it to the label expression tree. The spatial labeler allows us to select a different layer within the table of contents here. In this case, I've chosen service point and a search radius of 25 feet. We can specify that we want to find nearby features, but there's other spatial relationships available to us. Find polygons containing point, for example. And we can also choose here that we only want to find the nearest service point. There might be others that are within that search tolerance, but we want the one that is closest to us. So we have found just the nearest service point. From there, we want to navigate to the related service address records, and that might be a one-to-many relationship. And then for each service address, typically only one, we're going to label based on the street number. And again, this particular field is coming from the service address record. All right, let's look at a different example right now. This is going to be labeling support structures, poles, and we are going to be labeling based on nearby primary overhead conductor. In this case, this particular support structure happens to be nearest to feeder BW02. But if I select that particular pole right there, and I drag it to a new location, like so, and release, then we can see that it automatically picks up the feeder ID of the primary overhead that it is nearest to. So let's take a look at that label expression. Again, it's quite simple. We are going to be labeling support structures. This time, we are also going to be using the find nearest labeler, again using a search radius of 25 feet, looking for primary overhead electric line segment. This time, though, notice that we are not going to be choosing select only the nearest. In this particular case, we might have a support structure that is near two different feeders, and we want to label based on both. It brings up an interesting point, though. This particular support structure actually happens to be near 4 different primary overhead conductors, but only 2 distinct feeders. We don't want to show BW01 twice, though, so we need to be able to handle that. And the way that we perform that operation is via this SQL button. When we click on the SQL button, it's going to bring up this form, and this is where we can specify that instead of looking for all rows, we only want distinct rows, distinct based upon feeder ID. And we also want to sort the rows based on feeder ID so that BW01 comes before BW02. Once we find the nearby primary or overhead electric line segment that we are after, we can label based upon any fields that we want here. In this case, we're going to use feeder ID, and we'll make that in Tailvent orange font. So what you've seen in this demonstration is that the spatial labeler allows us to label based on features that are near other features, or potentially other spatial relationships can be used as well. As we saw in the first example, the spatial relation labeler can be used in conjunction with the relationship labeler to be able to further explore the relationship, say, between service point and service address.